patterns, but we're gonna go over these two fundamental entry patterns, right? And then kind of show you how they're used kind of throughout the day. Okay, so first let's go over the market today. All right, so Q's gapped down a little bit and then got bought. Okay, we did come into today bullish bias. Still watching the hourly as we have been to see if that's going to give us any guidance here on when we might actually start some kind of temporary downtrend. We do see that the SPY a little bit weaker than the Qs here, okay? But not sure there's too much to read into it. I've been asked before, kind of how does market rotation come into play? How can we identify market rotation? You know, for the most part, you look at the daily charts on the Qs and the SPY, and they're really not that different, right? But we do see from time to time, SPY might lead a little bit, Qs might lead other times, right? And that suggests to us, yeah, different sectors are kind of taking over and leading the way. But for the most part, there isn't a stark contrast here, at least between the Qs and the SPY, okay, as far as market rotation. But, you know, that is more indicative to us that this uptrend is going to continue. Okay, that means there are other pockets of strength that are coming forward, that there aren't, you know, just the same sector leading the way and potentially going to be the one to watch if the market gets tired. Okay, so for the most part here, or we've been staying pretty strong, expecting sell-offs to get bought, right, and the uptrend is continuing, okay? Now on the Qs and SPY here, we can look for underneath today's low, because I think today's gap down gives us a little bit to work with here as far as where we saw buyers step up and support the market. I think there was some news this morning about Apple warning and things like that. And so that brought in a lot of Apple and a lot of its, you know, suppliers and related names down. But I mean, look at where the Qs is going to end the day here. So kind of that bad news wasn't that bad. So we can see that the market was supported here off of today's low. I think underneath today's low could be a good starting point. It'll be a little bit less bullish. See if we get some follow through to the downside, right? And if we do, we can start to look for another entry. And the thing is, too, I always mention, you know, if we get the follow through, look for the next base breakdown or the next sell setup, right, for an entry. And those are two different things based on our terminology. And that's what we're going to be getting into today. So I'm kind of going to walk you through a couple names and then identify the patterns. Okay, so the breakdown or the breakout, and then the buy setup or the sell setup, which is essentially a retracement play. Okay, so let's start with the FLR here today. FLR gap down today, pretty bearish gap, right? Clearing support. All right, pro gap. All right, it's definitely not novice because it's not extended away from the 20 MA prior to gapping down there on the daily. Okay, so in the morning, we start off with the 1 minute time frame because with the least amount of information here, we want to see kind of the quickest, earliest patterns that are going to set up. Okay, now definition for a base breakdown, which is probably the most common pattern among traders, right? Consolidation, breakout, breakdown, right? So what we want to see is a series of equal highs and equal lows. Basically, the chart went sideways for a period of time, okay? We usually want a minimum of 3. So like if we're going to talk about a 1 minute breakdown here, I think this would be the earliest because we do have 3 bars here of consolidation, okay? You know, this is a little bit nicer. We do get more bars involved in this spacing here, okay, before we get this breakdown. And then this one is also pretty nice, okay, this one here. So I wish I'd played one of these. Did think that it was down a bit much. It opened a little bit late. I I think that threw off kind of the patterns a little bit. This was the favorite gap down this morning, was just slow on the trigger here, but here were the entry patterns. If you had happened to catch it, or if you were just a little bit more focused, right, a little bit more ready for it, these really to me were the opportunities. Okay, even this, you can see we got a lot of bars here. Now once it starts to go here, right, we don't have a pattern for this. We don't have a pattern to be falling in here, here, right? That's just multiple bars down. You should already be in it. The play is going. Okay, so that is the base breakdown. Most common, a lot of people know that pattern pretty well. It's an expansion of the range after some kind of consolidation. Okay, all right, so that is the base breakdown. Same thing goes for breakouts. Now we're going to look at the buy setup, okay, which is the way to play something long. The sell setup would be the vice versa. Let me see if we have one on the FLR. Oh, I think we do, but at this point it had already moved a lot, so this is a pretty low quality sell setup in here, okay, which is that it retraced. All right, but something moved this much. This level of retracement is too shallow. Okay, TLRA, nice gap up, following through on the gap up, okay, and had some nice buy setups. Okay, here we got the uptrend already established. All right, and then we get the retracement. Now, some people describe the buy setup as 3 or more red bars. Okay, the definition that I use is a series of lower highs. I want at least 2 or more. So here's a high, lower high, lower high, another lower high, lower high. And then when the lower high, recent lower high gets taken out, right, that's your entry point. So as we're watching this come in, right, we're anticipating, okay, if it breaks out over this bar, I'm going to be in, and then the stop goes down here, okay? Now, after the first 20 to 30 minutes of the morning, right, we move off of the 1 minute onto the 2 minute, right? So it gives us a chance to consolidate that opening volatility, that opening movement, right? And kind of makes the chart easier to read. We got more information, consolidate the information, right? Makes it easier. So here we get 2 minute buy setup, okay? After the first hour, we move on to the 5. Okay, and so those are the time frames that we're now looking for the patterns on, right? You could always find probably, even later in the day, 1 minute patterns of all kinds, right? And that's because, that we're getting a lot more noise on the 1 minute, and the 5 minute kind of consolidates that noise and kind of cleans it up. Okay, so on the 5 minute here, right, you can see again 3 or more red bars, or another way of kind of looking for this is a series of lower highs. When those series of lower highs breaks, right, that sets the pivot and then gives us the entry. Okay, so that's the buy setup. All right, so I know, since the open house, there've been a lot of people still getting used to the terminology, understanding when we say buy setup or sell setup or base breakout or breakdown, right, what is it that we're referring to? Okay, so you can see even here, on this TLRA, you might get something that resembles a bit of a base there, a little bit of consolidation. You're going to get a lot of, in-between patterns as well. The market's not, meant just to move in these ways. Now, the reason that we like these kind of patterns, it gives us a chance to either put our stop at a pivot point or an area of support that's held, right, and a clear entry point and decent enough reward to risk, right, so that we're not just chasing something because it's up a bunch of bars in a row, or trying to short something just because it's down a bunch of bars in a row, right? It gives a point where we are likely to get the next move and still have a decent reward to risk, okay? So those are the two fundamental entry patterns that we use. Fundamental not in the sense that we're looking at necessarily balance sheets here, but just from here extends all the other patterns that you're going to hear, right? The 1, 2, 3 is basically just a breakout on a smaller time frame, looking for a secondary entry, letting that first buy setup trigger, right? And then say we're looking for a secondary entry, we let it trigger. If there's a reaction, we wait for the reaction, and then over the reaction. So now we would be entering over 1267, right? Instead of this initial pivot. So instead we'd be getting in here. Okay, so all of the entries that we have build upon these two concepts. Okay, and so hopefully for those of you new in the room and still getting the terminology down, this will help kind of give you a nice outline here to work with. All right. All right, so that's going to do it for today's market wrap. Going into tomorrow, if we get underneath today's low, if we get follow through, we can start to look for some short-term downside. Maybe that'll start the pullback on the daily. Larger time frame, still bullish, still look higher, but we can be looking for a short-term pullback if we show some weakness. Okay, so we're mostly just grinding up here. Still going to be higher going into tomorrow unless we actually break today's low. Okay. All right. So that's going to do it for today's market wrap. We'll be back at it tomorrow, and I'll talk to you then.